Now, as soon as you walk into the main building here on Ellis Island, you're greeted with actual luggage that was found here. This is real people's luggage that was apparently lost that is easily over 100 years old. On a superficial side note, the baggage back then was not as user-friendly as like the luggage you see today. I wonder if this floor is original. So this here talks about Castle Garden, which is essentially Ellis Island's predecessor. A future episode coming up will feature Castle Clinton, so I won't talk too much about it now. So throughout the colonial era and for some time afterwards, the first real way for immigration from Europe to the U.S. was from merchant ships who would carry goods such as tobacco and lumber from the U.S. to European ports. In order to make the return trip back to the U.S. profitable, they would in turn take passengers from European ports back to the U.S. However, these passengers had a slow, rough journey to the U.S. in which passengers didn't always necessarily survive the journey. The introduction of steamships did help alleviate how long the journey would take, as well as quarters would be a little bit roomier. Now this here is talking about the forced removal of a wave of humanity with the forced removal of Native American Indians from east of the Mississippi River to the west of the Mississippi River. You could devote a whole YouTube channel to this type of history, which was just absolutely awful. So with Europe's growing appetite for products grown here in the States, such as sugar and cocoa, more and more labor was needed to fulfill the growing demand on the farms. So now enter mass slavery, where slaves were loaded aboard ships in horrifying conditions and brought to the U.S. Over 500,000 slaves were eventually brought to North America. So I have never heard of orphan trains, but after the Civil War with the Transcontinental Railroad, young men, usually between the ages of 14 and 17, would leave their meager paying jobs in New York, as well as their families, to go west in search of better paying jobs and the opportunity for a better future. They would usually work on farms for most of the year and then be able to attend school throughout the winters. It says here, for some newcomers, their port of entry was, by choice or by chance, their final destination. Can you imagine boarding a ship and not entirely knowing where you were going? And you may not even speak the native language to where you were going. But I mean, it just goes to show you that a lot of the world's population was absolutely desperate and, I would imagine, very eager to give themselves at least a fighting chance for a better future and a better life. This here talks about what it was like when immigrants first stepped off the ship in New York or Boston. Some would be met by family and friends who were already here, while others who arrived alone would be met by aid societies who would help them find work and a place to stay. However, during the Civil War, recruiters waited on the docks ready to take full advantage of new immigrants to fight for their newfound country. So if you arrived here without meeting up with any friends or family members who were already here, it paints a picture of almost being easy prey for either ship captains looking to be repaid for their voyage or for army recruiters or swindlers. You almost had to keep your head on a swivel, man, without really entirely knowing, who to trust. Why can't you trust this person versus that person? I mean, a lot of confusion, I imagine. Obviously, with this influx of people coming into the U.S., and especially back in this time period, diseases and sicknesses were inevitably on the rise. So natural-born citizens of the U.S. blamed immigrants for illness outbreaks, and this is a cartoon of the time depicting this very scenario. This will be a recurring theme that we'll get deeper into in Part 2 as well as Part 3 of my time here at Ellis Island. every stage of American history, diverse groups have been involved in the ongoing process of redefining the country and who is and who can be an American. Obviously, with the mass migration to here in the U.S., there was an explosion of supply and demand, and immigrants became the ideal labor pool to help stoke the newly accelerated American economy. In a future episode of Running Down History, I will be at a textile mill in Massachusetts, so we will be able to examine that when that episode comes out. So now I'm getting ready to head upstairs to the famous registry room. This hall, the registry room, is absolutely stunning. However, I would imagine passengers such as my great-grandfather would have had an entirely different opinion. So newly arrived immigrants would form a line and go up the stairs to here in the registry room, where they would first stop would be at a 6-second specialist, which is a person who would look at each person to quickly identify obvious medical conditions. These people would then move on to more in-depth medical condition screening. So here at Ellis Island, there were and are entire buildings devoted to medical reasons, from numerous operating rooms to a psychiatric ward and even a morgue, which I believe you can take what is called here as the hard hat tour, which brings you into some of these medical buildings that still stand. So this here just talks about the step-by-step experience new arrivals would have experienced here at Ellis Island. Aid societies were busy here at Ellis Island, where they would provide food and protection for immigrants from falling prey to unfair labor and wages. I feel like every horror film I've ever seen has one of these in it. So I'm going to get into what the different chalk markings meant actually next episode. Oh, this quote is great. They asked us questions, how much is 2 and 1? How much is 2 and 2? But the next young girl, also from our city, went and they asked her, how do you wash stairs, from the top or from the bottom? She says, I don't go to America to wash stairs. Now, every immigrant who was at Ellis Island would be marked with chalk marks, and an X didn't necessarily mean they were not allowed to land in the U.S., but it did mean that more examinations were needed. I wonder what type of chalk marks my great-grandfather would have had. Now, after all the examinations and waiting in lines, the food stand here would be an important stop. For some reason, though, kielbasa is under candy. Did candy or kielbasa mean something different back then? They also even had a money exchange here, which makes sense, but that doesn't necessarily come to the forefront of your mind when one's thinking about Ellis Island. They have all different kinds of money from countries here that don't even exist anymore, which is pretty cool. Coming up on the next episode of Running Down History, I will be taking a deeper look at what all of the chalk markings actually meant, as well as the living conditions here at Ellis Island, and the eventual rise of anti-immigration sentiment, and much more. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and tune in next week at the same time, same day, same channel.